Good afternoon. It's good to be back in Laredo with so many good friends. Today we're here to talk about a surge of humanity coming across our southern border and what we might be able to do working together to address that issue. You've heard it described in a number of ways. One, I think the Director of Homeland Security said it was a challenge, not a crisis. A little earlier today, we were in Carrizo Springs, Congressman Cuellar and me, and one of the people there responsible for taking care of these young men, these unaccompanied minors who are being processed at that facility, said, this is a Category 5 hurricane in the Gulf with tropical storm force winds on the coast. It's coming. Everybody we've heard from today said that this is just the beginning, and things are going to get much, much worse unless we step up and do something about it. Now, this issue is very complex, as you know. As Congressman Cuellar and I have talked, sometimes people talk about the push factors, that is the violence, the lack of economic opportunity and the like in countries to our south, but it's also about pull factors, and that is, what are the immigration laws in the United States? How are they enforced? How do they make sure that if people want to come to America that they come through legal channels and not just rush the border and be able to successfully cross and jump ahead of the line? So this is a very, obviously a very complex issue. We've got a number of people here to speak to you. Congressman Cuellar, Mayor Sines, and then we can answer some questions. So let me turn it over to my friend Henry Cuellar.
Thank you, Senator. And again, I would like to emphasize bipartisan, because I think you're going to see Monday an all-Republican delegation go to El Paso, then you'll see an all-Democratic delegation coming in the next month or so, earlier than that, but this is bipartisan. This is what the Senator and I have emphasized. We started off today in Carrizo Springs to see the kids that are there, ages 13 to 17. We've seen this before. We started in 2014. We started in 2019, and we're seeing them again. The numbers yet have not hit the numbers that we saw in May of 2019, but they're going there because the high months of March, April, May, or June are coming up, and we're seeing those numbers go up. So as the Senator said, we got to look at both the push factors and the pull factors.
We'll be happy to answer a few questions, and we have a lot of expertise up here, so if you want to direct them to somebody in particular, please go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Senator. Thanks for talking to us. Question, could you describe what you saw today in Carrizo Springs? How many teens were there? What were the facilities like? Were they socially distanced? And did you have any concerns about it?
Well, as Congressman Cuellar said, this is not the first surge of individuals we've seen trying to come across the border. It is the first time we've done it during a pandemic. And obviously, we've seen Title 42, which has come up here several times, which is a public health directive from the Center for Disease Control, basically limit the people coming back and forth across the border to essential personnel and traffic. That is all going away. People are coming across without being tested. Some people are tested who are positive, and then they're released to get on a bus and go to the interior of the United States. But specifically talking about the young people who come across, as I think our friends of the Border Patrol will tell you, this is part of a calculated strategy by the human smuggling organizations that are really transnational criminal organizations with an international network. We saw in Del Rio, the Del Rio sector told us, Congressman Cuellar and I a little earlier today, that there were people from 55 different countries detained recently in the Del Rio sector for the Border Patrol. So obviously it's not people just coming from Central America, not just people coming from Mexico, it's people coming from literally around the world. But the cartels, the criminal organizations have figured out our laws. In some ways, they understand our laws better than we do ourselves, and they play the gaps. They find the gaps, they find the places where they can advance their goals, which is basically to make money, and then by moving people into the United States and overwhelming our system. Right now, there are 1.2 million backlogged immigration court cases. You've heard a lot today about what Congressman Cuellar and I and others have tried to do to get more immigration judges on the border at the point where they encounter the migrant so that they can have their, let's say, asylum case decided quickly while they're still in custody rather than release them never to return again. I will say, and maybe I'll ask Henry to come up and follow up, I think they're doing the best they can under very, very difficult circumstances. They are wearing masks, they are trying to socially distance, but as you may have heard, previously the capacity of this particular facility was limited, I think, to 40%, but because the numbers were so great, they've gone now to 100%. And so this is another example of where the public health guidance that all of us are trying our best to follow sort of gets canceled out in the interest of necessity, which is to try to deal with this population. But the one point that that was made to us several times today, we heard it come up again here. You can't build enough facilities to take care of all the people that are going to continue to come across the border. You have to do something to stop or to slow down the input or the flow into the country, and that's the challenge.
More question for Senator Cornyn before I ask
Let me just
you?
make one point, and we'll take another question. Again, you're not going to solve this problem by just spending more and more money trying to provide more and more resources to care for this flow of migrants, because the number is just going to continue to get higher and higher and higher. And as we heard today, you can't build enough facilities, you can't create enough testing, you can't create enough resources to deal with this unless you deal somehow with the pull factors. And that's where, again, we have to get to a better place when it comes to getting people with legitimate asylum claims in front of an immigration judge so they can make their case. And those that can't would be returned to their country of origin. Right now, the biggest problem is that we've got 1.2 million immigration cases backlogged. People are given a notice to reappear months, maybe years later, and guess what? Most of them don't show up. And there's a default order of deportation entered, which is unfair to the people who have legitimate claims. So that's another area where Congressman Cuellar and I have been working the last few years trying to recruit others to help us deal with some of these pull factors as well. Treat people humanely, make sure people with legitimate claims can have those vindicated and enforced before an immigration judge, but to make sure that we sort out the flow of humanity coming across the border.
My question was, have you heard about these COVID restrictions being lifted at CBP facilities where I don't believe they've been lifted yet, and they have been facing a lot of problems because, especially in Rio Grande Valley, they've been over capacity.
Well, as Congressman Cuellar said, Title 42, which is a public health directive from the Center for Disease Control, this applies to all adults. There is a court order in place issuing an injunction against applying those to unaccompanied minors. So it would apply to family units and would apply to adults. But the problem is this virus does not play by our rules. And I worry that just as we're starting to get on top of the pandemic here in the United States with better testing, vaccination, and obviously social distancing, masking, and the like, that we don't really know what unrestricted flow back and forth across the border from Mexico, and it's not just from Mexico. As I mentioned, in Del Rio, they said there are people coming here from 55 different countries just through the Del Rio sector of the border control. To me, that's a public health threat, and one we need to get on top of it. And that's just one more reason, and there are many, many reasons, but that's just one more reason why we need to address the pull factors, because we know the push factors of poverty, violence, and the like, economic opportunity, are always going to be there. People want to come to the United States, but what we need to do is to make sure nobody gets to jump to the head of the line. They have to follow the legal procedures, because this is what happens when there's chaos associated with the illegality and the lack of control of our immigration system.